Hi, Freedom Warriors, and welcome to another episode of Essential Talks, where you stay for the conversation and you leave empowered. I'm your host, Jamie Russo, and the lovely Jessica. Now, we have Dr. Daniel Nagase. You all probably recognize him. He took his first stand and talking about the Nuremberg Code. We have him on today to help share some information on Dr. Mel Bruchet. He was supposed to be on. He's had a very long day, very tired. So Dr. Nagase has a lot of information about the topic. He's been fighting hand in hand, trying to get Dr. Mel out of the hospital. And we're going to start to cover the psychiatric hospital use to silence activists. So give us an update on that, Dr. Nagase, and we'll just kind of go from there and get everybody posted on this new information that's come out, because Dr. Mel has just gotten out of the hospital today, so very long day for him.
Thank you very much for having me on. So the situation started on December the 8th of last year. Mel Bruchet, he's an 81-year-old grandfather. He was taken by force from his own house with 8 police officers, 4 squad cars, taken out of his own house, marched up the street where he lives in front of all his neighbors in handcuffs, and then taken by the RCMP to the hospital, the emergency department, for a psychiatric assessment. So I was actually on an interview with the Western Standard when this all went down. And when I finished my interview with the Western Standard, I asked, where did Mel go? And there was 2 other doctors who were in the house at the time, because Mel was having meetings with activists, people who want to raise awareness to the truths about this coronavirus epidemic and these injections. So I eventually received a phone call from the emergency department from Dr. Bruchet. And then he says, well, he wanted me to talk to the emergency doctor who was on. So I told her the whole story about how, both Dr. Bruchet and I and the other house guests that were organizing a weekly Sunday event, I explained to the emergency doctor, everyone's been sleep deprived. There was a situation that occurred from the night before where everyone was kept awake till 3:30 in the morning by a tenant at the hospital, not at the hospital, sorry, I have another guest here, a tenant in Mel Bruchet's own home. And so she didn't seem very interested at all in knowing the specifics of why, Dr. Bruchet might be sleep deprived. And she just kind of said, yeah. And I thought, okay, well, maybe she's a very busy emergency doctor. She just wants to get to the next patient. So then I was very surprised about an hour later to get a phone call from Dr. Bruchet calling me from the emergency department saying he's being held in the hospital involuntarily because he might have a diagnosis of frontal lobe dementia. Now, I'm an emergency doctor. So if I suspect a patient has dementia, well, my first question is, how bad is it? Are they able to find their way back home? If a patient is able to find their way back home without getting lost, they are not so demented that they need to stay in the emergency department. The next step I would do is say, call a friend, call a family member. Can they take care of you? It's okay to forget things every now and then. I forget things every now and then. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be in a hospital. Forgetting things every now and then might be early dementia, or it might be normal. That's no reason to keep someone in hospital. But Mel told me on the phone that the emergency doctor, she was keeping him involuntarily, forcibly confined in the hospital because he might have dementia. So that didn't make any sense to me at all. But what's worse was after that, after the emergency doctor certified and made Mel an involuntary patient, a psychiatrist came along and seconded that opinion. So basically confirmed that Mel should be held in the hospital involuntarily as a psychiatric patient because he might have dementia. He might be forgetting things more often than he should. And that's how it all started on December the 8th.
Wow. I thought that you could only hold people like that involuntary if they're a danger to themselves or others, and it's clearly shown that they are, not just that you've forgotten things, or that sounds completely un-Canadian and completely unconstitutional in that way. So so at this point, he's gotten out now. So how is he doing right now?
He's still recovering from being forcibly medicated. So over the past 3 weeks, he was in the hospital for 25 days. He was forcibly medicated with antipsychotics. And the thing is, Mel Bruchet, Dr. Mel Bruchet, is an 81-year-old grandfather. It's been known for over 10 years that anyone over the age of 65, anyone getting into the sunset years of their life, they should never get antipsychotics because antipsychotic medications can cause strokes. And in fact, the older you are, the more likely it is that an antipsychotic medication will cause a stroke. Now, normally as an emergency doctor, I would only give antipsychotics if someone's hallucinating. They're seeing things that aren't there. They're hearing people that aren't there, right? Or if they are, extremely high and out of their mind on some kind of substance, and I need them to stop, tearing light fixtures off the walls or flipping over bed mattresses. Yes, I'm an emergency doctor. If someone needs to be brought down from whatever's plaguing their mind, whether it was a bad dose of methamphetamine or cocaine or whatever's going on in the streets, I will give them an antipsychotic. But not to an 81-year-old grandfather who's never had any criminal record, never had any history of violence. There is absolutely no justification to give an antipsychotic. There's no hallucinations, there's no violence, there's no threat to harm themselves or harm another person. It's just absolutely unconscionable from an emergency doctor's standpoint to take that type of a risk with an elderly patient, to give them an antipsychotic that might cause them to have a stroke 3 days later.
Oh.
How long did they have him on the medication for?
So before he started to get mini stroke symptoms, 3 days. They forced him to take the medication, and they basically said to him, you take this medication or else we'll hold you down with Paladin security guards and force you to take an injection. You either cooperate or you get bruises and we give it to you anyway. That was basically the options he was given, Dr. Bruchet. So he took the medication, and after the 3rd day, when he finally got access to the phone, because they severely restricted his access, they wouldn't let him have any access to the phone for 5 days at a time. When he first went to the psychiatric ward, they took away his cell phone. No access to the cell phone. And then a few days after that, they wouldn't even let him use the hospital phone to call friends. So 3 days after, he was forcibly given this medication called Abilify, which is also called aripiprazole. He started to have slurred speech, and he had trouble remembering names. So in medicine, in emergency medicine and neurology, we call that word-finding difficulty. So here is a family doctor. He's been a family doctor for longer than I've been alive. He's 81 years old. He just retired three years ago. He is the most loquacious, eloquent person imaginable. And all of a sudden, he can't talk straight, he's stuttering, and he's having trouble remembering words, especially names. Those, from an emergency doctor standpoint, are signs of a stroke. And this is 3 days after he started an antipsychotic medication. And so at that time, I asked for the emergency department to give me the name of the neurologist on call. And the neurologist on call, I think it was either Dr. Wang or Dr. Wong, they went up and they assessed Dr. Bruchet to see if he had a stroke after being forced to take an antipsychotic medication. Unfortunately, the neurologist at the time refused to disagree with the psychiatrist. It was this, oh, we're both specialists, we're not going to make each other's lives difficult, we'll just kind of ho-hum and go along with each other. And that, to me, as an emergency doctor, is extremely offensive, because this information has been out for more than 10 years, especially in the cardiology literature, which is talking about heart attacks that might be increased with antipsychotic medications. The neurology literature that says, yep, we did notice a significant increase in strokes after patients were given antipsychotics. And of course, because the emergency doctor has to know a little bit about everything, it's in the emergency medicine literature as well. The danger of giving an antipsychotic to an elderly person. And yet, for some reason, 3 psychiatrists in the North Vancouver hospital, which is Lionsgate Hospital, all decided that, yep, it's okay to give someone who's 81 years old a medication that might cause them to have strokes.
So, given what you've said about that there's really the dangers around giving this medication to someone of that age, as well as the lack of justification given his behavior for that type of medication, and the way that what you explained with psychiatric hospitals being used to silence activists, what do you feel was the reason behind that? Do you feel like it was to potentially build a case to discredit him, basically, and have this as a marring of his not to say reputation, but his ability to present logical cases and things like that? Why would this happen?
Mel Bruchet became very well known after he started speaking about the 13 stillbirths at Women and Children's Hospital in Vancouver. And I think, given the agenda that we see happening all around us, it would be awfully beneficial for people who are trying to profit off of these injections, the most dangerous injections in the history of medicine. If they could try and craft a story, it's like, oh, you don't have to listen to anything Dr. Bruchet said. He's just a crazy, demented old grandpa. See, he's in a psychiatric hospital. And even worse than that, if they could mentally impair him with an actual stroke by giving him medications that cause strokes, so that when he finally leaves the hospital, he's not his usual self, he can barely speak, then that would do an incredible harm to all the awareness that Mel has been working over the past 3 months to bring awareness to stillbirths and side effects from these injections. And that actually brings me to the topic of the RCMP. After I had heard from Mel, when he was able to sneak a phone from one of the other patients who was still allowed to use the phone on the psychiatric ward, he called me and he had the slurred speech, the word finding difficulty. I got in touch with a lot of his supporters. And I also contacted the Mounties for Freedom officers and RCMP support group. And they suggested, RCMP officers are allowed to do wellness checks, especially if there's suspicion of abuse. And of course, me being a doctor, now I had a suspicion that the psychiatrists were abusing Mel Bruchet by giving him a dangerous medication. So I sent a message to the RCMP. I think I sent it as an email asking them to do a wellness check. And we had a dozen other of Mel's friends and family call the RCMP asking them to do a wellness check because they suspected abuse of the patient while he was in the psychiatric ward. And guess what the RCMP said? No, he's already under the care of a doctor. He does not need a wellness check. So what are people supposed to do? If law enforcement refuse to investigate assault, and assault is when you give someone a medication that they don't want to take that can cause them harm. That is assault. What are people supposed to do when law enforcement refuse to investigate or even look at a case of assault because it's happening in a hospital, because it's nurses and doctors who are committing this crime? What are people supposed to do if law enforcement won't even look at it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, it has a lot of people kind of shaking their heads. Just this whole scenario, like it's you got to pinch yourself sometimes and ask, like, am I really still in Canada anymore? Just all the stuff that's happening, we're watching it left, right, and center. So we are so happy that Dr. Mel Bruchet is safe, and you know, you're a good man. You've got him a lot of support. I know he has support, but it's individuals like yourself that are going to keep the rest of us safe and going. And hats off to you, Dr. Daniel Nagase, for all the work you're doing. And I do know, was Dr. Bruchet involved with serving the RCMP with the investigation on what you served in as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was November 11th on Remembrance Day. Both Dr. Bruchet and I, we wrote police files to complain that we suspected there was a crime going on in the government of British Columbia, where the health minister, the premier were all involved in a financial conflict of interest by pushing a product, which is the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, and then profiting off of sales of that product because that product makes the share prices of Pfizer or Moderna rise in value. And that's something that a lot of government officials, even healthcare professionals, doctors own Pfizer stock. It's a part of their mutual funds. So many people have that as a part of their RRSPs. So how is it possible that a health minister, the one here in BC is named Bonnie Henry, how is it possible that every time she forces people in British Columbia to take a vaccine, her retirement value goes up? How is that even allowable? And then, so we filed complaints, Dr. Bruchet and I, we filed complaints against the College of Physicians and Surgeons of BC, the health minister, the premier, and we filed pages and pages of police reports that we suspected this crime was occurring. So that was November 11th. About a month later, I sent some extra documents to the officer who was assigned to the case, and there's only one officer who was assigned to this case. I sent him a copy of that Pfizer post-marketing survey report that was leaked out, that showed all the side effects in the first 3 months that their new product was out on the market, right? And it detailed all the adverse events direct from Pfizer's own file. I haven't heard from this officer who was assigned to this conflict of interest case, right? I've sent him extra information, extra evidence, and nothing but silence. So one officer assigned to the biggest corruption case in British Columbia, the biggest financial conflict of interest case in British Columbia history, potentially. And then all of a sudden, 8 officers sent to the home of an 81-year-old grandfather? Like, how does that make any sense? You have 8 officers to spare to drag an 81-year-old grandfather to the hospital for a mental health assessment, but you only have 1 officer available for potentially the biggest corruption case in British Columbia history.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, with everything the two of you are doing out there, you know, it's hard not to look at this as almost like a silencing operation. We've seen this before. It's nothing new. It's new to our country, but many other countries have done the same thing. One of the easiest ways to discredit somebody is get them into the psych ward. It stops a lot of following. It kind of takes the wind out of their sails, discredits them in probably one of the most easiest manners. It's almost like being in a conversation with somebody, and as soon as they call you a conspiracy theorist, the whole room stops listening to you. And this is the exact same thing. This is crazy. So again, we're so happy that he's safe and you have him safe. We're looking forward to letting him speak his story today or tonight, but we understand just being out of the hospital, doing several interviews, and that would be very tiring, especially after the medications that he's been on and the severity of the medications that could have done some very serious damage. So we're just glad he's out and safe. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much for the attention you're bringing to this, because this is something, there's mental health acts in every province. And unfortunately, those mental health acts are written with such vague wording that, anyone can find any excuse to have someone committed to the hospital. And once they're in hospital, there's almost no accountability. Right? I mean, the Mental Health Act in BC says, well, if you disagree with the psychiatrist's diagnosis, well, you can go to a review panel filled with the psychiatrist's colleagues and supporters. There's no objectivity, there's no justice, there's no fairness in the system.
I honestly, I can't believe that our taxpayer money goes towards silencing people trying to bring out the truth. Like, I mean, like at this point in time, I shouldn't be surprised anymore. But to this degree, I'm like, I can't believe that this is Canada. I'm still in a bit in shock here. I apologize. This is flooring.
Now, I would like to do kind of a shout out to any of the doctors all across Canada that are witnessing or watching this episode. There was criminal investigation that was brought up. Do you have the paperwork for that, Dr. Daniel, that people could get their hands on, look at, and start filing in every province? Because I'm pretty sure this goes right across the board to give information how to look up whether the premiers and the health ministers' pockets are getting fat in their retirement funds, and just how to file them and get them in so that we can get this ongoing investigations in every single province and territory across Canada.
Dr. Bruchet and I started out with just a police report. So it's the same kind of police report that you would file for like a stolen car or a house break-in. And we just cited the specific act in British Columbia law called the Members Conflict of Interest Act, where being a member of some kind of organization, and while you are a member, you abuse the powers of that membership to profit. So, for example, in the situation of government, right? You're a member of government. You're a member of parliament. You're a health minister, and then you're abusing that position as a member of a certain organization to profit off of other people. So that's the way the wording is in British Columbia's Members Conflict of Interest Act. But I'm sure there are other conflict of interest acts that are worded slightly differently in every province. And so basically what Mel and I did was we gave the politician's name or the executive director or the registrar of the College of Physicians and Surgeons name and said, we, as a citizen, suspect this person for having profited unduly and violating the Members Conflict of Interest Act. And so from that point, then the RCMP actually has to show some interest, because as citizens, we can't go into, another person's bank account and say, hey, Royal Bank, or hey, Bank of Nova Scotia, show me all the financial records of the health minister, Bonnie Henry, right? They won't let you have that information. So then it has to be a legal process that involves an attorney general or a prosecutor saying, yes, the circumstantial evidence does show that this is a very harmful injection. Why is it that a health minister is promoting something harmful? Is there potential for profit here? And then they have to get a warrant that allows them to have access to the financial records of the suspect. But it first starts off with having a suspect, right? So that's the beginning, and we're still stuck at the beginning, right? All we've done so far, and we're still waiting for the RCMP to show some motivation with this case, is this is the suspect, this is the suspected crime, please investigate. Because as citizens, we can't go into banks and investigate ourselves.
I have a question as well too. For any of the newer people tuning in right now, do you mind if you know? You'd mentioned Dr. Mel was a family physician. Do you have any more details on his credentials a bit more, just so we can help our audience understand his background in the medical field and community, as well as if you do have any details of how he was made aware of the stillbirths? I'm very curious about that.
So Dr. Bruchet started working in the 1970s. So he's been a doctor longer than I've been alive. He's been a full-service family doctor. So he did emergency department work. He's worked in obstetrics. He's seen everything a family doctor would see back in the day when family doctors did everything. They delivered babies. They worked in the emergency department. They were on call. They were surgical assistants. Basically a jack of all trades. And, for the lack of the better words, you also have to be a specialist of all trades, because there aren't enough specialists, especially in the 70s and 80s. So the family doctor also had to be a specialist of all trades. So because Dr. Bruchet's been working for so long, even though he was in North Vancouver, which is a suburb of Vancouver, but it's literally just a 15-minute bicycle ride over a bridge, he has contacts throughout the medical community. Doulas, midwives, specialists, psychiatrists, obstetrician, everyone involved. Physiotherapists, chiropractors, you name it. Dr. Bruchet, because he's been working for so long, knows practically everyone. So how the information came to his attention was Dr. Bruchet was hosting a gathering for all the activists one weekend, right after one of his rallies on Sunday. And 3 doulas from Women and Children's Hospital came to visit the gathering after the vaccine side effect rally. And the 3 doulas, they told him, he's like, yeah, well, speaking of vaccine side effects, in mid-September, there was a day when there was 13 stillbirths in 24 hours. And Mel was like, what? And they confirmed, the 3 doulas confirmed the story with Mel. And then so ever since, Mel and I have been trying to get actual data information, but Women and Children's Hospital of Vancouver is not giving out the data, right? These are vital statistics that, as taxpayers, we pay for the hospital. That information belongs to us, right? And so how is it possible that hospital administrators can say, nope, you're not allowed to have that information. That's private information. We have to keep it under lock and key, and you're not allowed to have a copy of it. But that's the resistance we're seeing. And we're even seeing hospital administrators at Vancouver Coastal Health flat out lie and say, oh, that never happened. Right? And this is another thing I've noticed, especially with Dr. Bruchet. There was times myself or one of Dr. Bruchet's other friends would call the psychiatric floor of the hospital, and we'd say, oh, can we please speak to Dr. Mel Bruchet? And whoever answered the phone, the nurse or whatnot, would say, oh, there's no Melvin Bruchet here in the hospital. they have the staff at this hospital have no qualms about just lying to whoever's talking. They'll just pretend Mel's not there, even if he's standing at the nursing station saying, is this phone call for me? I've been waiting for a phone call. This absolute dishonesty from hospital administrators and hospital staff, it's sickening.
Well, if there's no recourse or consequence, then anybody can get away with anything. It's almost free game at that point, which is absolutely terrifying, especially coming from the medical community, where it's you go there with your heart in your hands, being like, "Please help me," and you expect them to have your best interest at heart and patient advocacy. And what we're getting here is something that it's out of a Stalinistic nightmare. So thank you for answering that. I appreciate that. Is there any way to submit, freedom of information requests or any kind of recourse to really get more information?
I think we do need, unfortunately, go through the whole entire process. But, it seems to me that the freedom of information legislation and if you don't get what you want, or if you get denied your freedom of information request, then you have to go to the provincial ombudsperson, and then they have 3 weeks or a month to adjudicate whether or not your freedom of information request was unjustly denied. It seems like the legislation was designed to prevent access, and the name Freedom of Information Act is actually the exact opposite. It's the Hiding of Information Act. But again, I mean, how else are you going to get it? You might get the information 6 months later when it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, that is true. But I think in situations like this, they keep us running in red tape. And this is where we all got to kind of get involved and keep them running in red tape. They're bogging us down. We need to bog them down as well in order to get the justice coming forward and the fair treatments, and make sure everything is running right. So any listeners, when you start to see any injustices, don't just sit off on the sidelines. It doesn't matter what it is. Get involved. If you get turned away from a place because you're not wearing a mask, phone the head office, phone the manager. Don't just leave it at the door. Follow up with it, because if we just leave it at the door, we're leaving the door open for situations like this to happen over and over and over again. So when they do happen, we have to raise hell, in a sense, to let them know they can't do this. It's not right. So. And I encourage everybody to do that. We can do everything peacefully. We can do everything respectfully, honorably. And I think this is the way that we start to cut right through this. Just keep them bogged down, keep them on their feet, and let them know that they're accountable. And that's how we show it. The more we have in numbers, especially phoning the hospital, if we get more people phoning the hospital in a situation like this, showing up at the hospital, doing peaceful protests, going to city halls and doing the protests, saying you need to release this person, or this man or woman, get them out of there, but just be relentless. Don't stop until we get what we need done, right? And we have to stick together on this.
And I always tell people, take names. If an administrator or someone is putting roadblocks, trying to prevent you from getting information, always take down names, because I think the day of reckoning is coming, and we need names of all those people who took part in criminal activity.
Yep, definitely. I suggest to record everything, every phone call that I wind up receiving or making, any interactions that are live. You don't have to film the person or their face. You can just have the recording. You can be respectful. on all of your encounters, especially if it's with police or authority. You can say, look, I'm leaving your face out of it, but this is for my protection. And then they'll be fine with you. But we need to have this evidence. This way we can hold those accountable later on for not fulfilling their duties and oaths.
So at this point, in regards to kind of next steps, I know that Dr. Mel just got out today, so really probably haven't really considered too much in terms of next. But have you guys discussed anything that any ways to go about this to try to get some kind of, you know, justice? I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
Well, I think we're taking things one day at a time. But we know the psychiatrists who are involved with this. We know the staff who've been involved with this. This has been going on for almost a month. And, you know, I mean, for what it's worth, I'm going to be writing college complaints, complaint to the College of Physicians and Surgeons about the fact that psychiatrists were administering medications that are known to cause strokes in someone who's 81 years old. So, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm missing out on dinner here.
Who are you talking to?
This is Jamie Russo.
How are you?
Hey, Jamie. I'm
This is
Jessica.
Jessica, yeah.
So this guy has been working honestly nonstop, like since 6 a.m. He is the most wellness warrior, true-hearted doctor I've ever met. And I'm just feeding him some food. So
Yes.
there you go, sir. Some food, sir.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you, Jessica.
That's so nice. It's nice to see that you have a good support system going on over there, and that they're keeping you fed and healthy in this during this struggle here. We did have a question from the audience. I'll give you a couple minutes to get a couple bites in though. But we're asking, since they have medicated Dr. Mel unnecessarily, is there any chance you feel that they could have injected Dr. Mel with anything other than the medicine that you advised, such as potentially the Cove jabs or anything like that, maybe potentially even against in secret without anyone's knowledge, which is again hard to say, but are you aware of that, or is that something that you feel like was a possibility or not?
That certainly is a possibility. It's hard to tell. Once staff feel comfortable just lying to your face and telling them there's no Mel Bruchet on the floor when obviously he's still being kept involuntarily on the floor, you know, once that level of dishonesty is rampant within a hospital, who knows? Right? I think that's certainly a possibility. They might have injected Mel without his permission, or while he was unconscious, they might have injected him with the vaccine. I mean, all we can do is cross our fingers and hope that did not happen.
Wow. Like I said, I appreciate you having worked so hard so long today, taking the time to come on and informing us about this. We do look forward to speaking to Dr. Daniel or Dr. Mel at a point once he's recovered. But you filling in this information so far, I mean, our viewers are probably just as stunned as I am right now that this this could be a possibility in a place that we thought was you know, a safe and fair country. Not that it has been over the past 2 years, but, you know, this is not the Canada that we thought we knew. That's for damn sure. We have another question here. So they're saying people can place criminal charges right to the courts without filing with the RCMP. People need to start doing this. Extortion, intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder, etc. That's absolutely right, Adrian. We definitely people can place those charges. So I don't know how that's. I'm not sure. I'm in Ontario, and so I think our system's a little bit different versus using our CMP. But yes, I mean, again, too, this is something where the power in numbers. The more that we group together, the more that we're pushing en masse. This is where we can actually make a difference. And also, actually, just a quick question too: how was it that you were able to get Dr. Mel released? You had mentioned earlier about some issues with being able to like getting him out and everything. So I'm just curious how you eventually did do that.
So I can't talk about too many specifics, but his
Okay.
daughter did sign him out. Mhm.
Okay, that's nice. That's good. That's good. Oh, and let's see here. So, Jamie, did you want to tackle this one?
Okay, it's from Isla, I believe, Leela. Dr. Mel was released from hospital. Phew. I guess that's very worried. Please give my best wishes and regards to him. So that's very nice of you, Leela, to give your best wishes. We all right now that know the situation are giving our best wishes to Dr. Mel. So, and we can see he's in good hands. We've already watched Dr. Nagase being fed and watered. So he's in a good place as well. So this is good. Very long day, as we heard, from 6 a.m. already. And what time is it there in your time, Dr. Nagase?
It is 8:41. Sorry, I thought it was an hour ago. So time flies for me.
Yeah. So you're going on a 14-hour work day. So yeah, that can be pretty intense all in itself, especially with high emotions and all kinds of stuff, right? So I guess I'll do.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
really appreciate you guys having me on, especially on short notice.
Yes.
And hopefully the next time we see each other, I'll have Mel Bruchet here with me.
Yes,
You
that
can
sounds
talk
great.
to him as well.
Yes, well, yeah, we'll
All
let
right.
you go for now. That was an exhausting day for you, and again, you're extremely articulate, even 14 hours into an incredibly long and emotionally trying day. So again, you're absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on. Our viewers really appreciate it, and just having this updated information so quickly was very fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nagase. Have a great night, and we'll talk to everyone later. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.